Hi there, this is Catherine with Enfolded Heart Music. Welcome back to Lyre Foundations. I hope you've enjoyed the course so far and the book as well, if that's something that's in your hands. Today we're going to be starting Chapter 1. I'll do the introduction for Chapter 1, which is lessons 1, 2, and 3, and then we will also do Lesson 1 today, which has to do with the structure of the lyre and understanding what the instrument actually is. So let's jump into the introduction first, and then we'll get into the lyre itself shortly after that. Alright, so Chapter 1 are the foundations of what the lyre is, how to hold it, and basic setup for the instrument. So we won't quite be playing it yet, but there's a couple of basic and, again, foundational pieces of information that are really helpful and important from my perspective to learn if you're just getting into the lyre. We have to know what instrument we're playing in order to know how to play it and to really make use of it in the best way possible. It's very easy, especially with the lyre, to think of it as kind of like another instrument, especially the harp. That seems to be the most common instrument it's compared to. The guitar would probably be the second most common comparison. So it's very easy because the lyre is less well known than than the harp or the guitar. It's very easy to say, well, it's kind of like the harp, and to approach it as such. And while there's some good comparisons and some helpful things about looking at it in that way, it's also quite inaccurate, and so that will lead to frustration and to limitation in your capacity to play the lyre if you don't understand what the difference actually is and what the lyre is in and of itself, rather than in its approximation to another instrument. So Lesson 1 is going to be all about that. Lesson 2 and 3 is about how to hold the instrument, some suggestions about posture, and then how to set it up in regards to tuning in particular. One caveat for this section, which kind of applies to a lot of the first part of the entire course as a whole, is that the lyre, it's an ancient instrument, and so it's got many different forms to it. Of course, we're focusing on the diatonic lyre, also sometimes called the folk lyre, in this particular course. But even within that category, there's a lot of variations on how the instrument is made. So it's sort of a beautiful thing and also a limitation in other ways in regards to teaching this, because some things I'm going to suggest are not going to be a good fit for you because your lyre is a little bit different. We can talk about different ways in which they vary, but for the time being, my encouragement to you is just to make note of the differences between your lyre and mine so that you can really get into your lyre, and just take note of, again, those things that are different so that you're not frustrated because of the lack of applicability of what I'm saying in regards to your specific instrument. So just take note of that. If you've got any questions about that, if you notice something different about your lyre compared to mine, excuse me, feel free to reach out with any questions or comments about that, and I'm happy to help you as I'm able to with my limited experience in regards to comparisons to different lyres. All right, let's jump into the lyre structure itself and understand a bit more about this beautiful instrument. Okay, we've zoomed in now so that you can see the lyre itself a little bit better. You may notice mine has a little bit of a curve to it, which I personally find very helpful, but it's probably going to be different than yours unless you have this specific lyre. I can hold it like this, and I probably will for a little bit, but when I play it, it's actually more at an angle like this, making use of the strap. But we'll get to that later. So we're in Lesson 1. This is pages 7, 8, and 9 of the book. And we're going to focus particularly on pages 7 and 8 for this first part, and then jump into page 9 after that. So what are the basic parts of the lyre? What is it that makes the sound, and how does it make the sound? So in general, the whole instrument itself, in a certain sense, is called simply the body of the instrument. This excludes things like the strings and the tuning pegs, things that are kind of added on to it. So the basic block of wood itself is simply called the body of the lyre. We're going to kind of go from the top to the bottom. So we've got the whole lyre, which is the body. We have this piece at the top here. This is called the crossbar. In ancient lyres, the pieces are a bit more distinct, and so this crossbar is often straight across and has its own distinct piece of wood. But for this instrument, and the way that this particular lyre was made, it's all one piece of wood. So this is the crossbar up here. On the crossbar, we have the tuning pegs. This is, of course, what we use to tune. We will turn the pegs to the right or to the left, which will raise or lower the pitch because it makes the string tighter or looser. So the strings are tied around the tuning pegs and then go all the way to the bottom, which we'll get to in a moment. Clarification about tuning and how to do all that will come in later lessons in Chapter 1. But for now, just to know, we've got crossbar, tuning pegs, and the strings that are attached and wrapped around the tuning pegs. We then have two arms, which are right here and right here. Again, this is all one piece of wood, but in more ancient structures and styles, this is a more distinct piece of the instrument. So it may be worth, if you're curious or want to understand that a little bit more deeply, it might be worth your time to look up ancient lyres and take a look at that. Crossbar, tuning pegs, both arms, 1 and 2. Okay. As we keep going down, excuse me, we then have what's called the sound box or the chamber. This is this bottom part right here. Now this is going to be pretty different for different styles of lyres, even diatonic lyres. I've talked about this in a video previously, so check that out if you want to know specifically the difference between a solid body lyre and an acoustic lyre. I'm going to briefly go over it here, but if you'd like to hear the difference in sounds and a little bit in more depth, explanation of those differences, then check that out. I'll put the link in the bottom in that description. So the sound box or the sound chamber, again, is this whole section right here behind the strings. And this is what really creates resonance, fullness in sound, and also kind of pushes the sound out so that it doesn't get stuck right here, but actually projects to the audience. With a acoustic lyre, you will have an actual box. So you'll have a kind of thickness here, and the sound reverberates within there. It makes it louder. It has the danger of maybe making it a little bit muddy, depending on the build of your lyre and the way that you play it. But it creates greater volume, and it creates a fuller sound because the sound waves have more time and more space to kind of echo within there before they're projected outwards. With an acoustic or a hollowed body lyre, you also have sound holes. You'll have 1 or 2. You don't usually have more than that as far as I understand. And this is to help the instrument sort of breathe and push out the air from inside to, again, project it forward. With an acoustic, you will also have a bridge, which is this piece of wood at the bottom here. The strings go over it. So the strings go from the tuning pegs all the way across the whole body of the lyre, over the bridge, and then down into the instrument. The bridge is what communicates the sound waves and sound vibrations. It's actually the vibrations, not really the waves, into the sound box and chamber, the body of the instrument, essentially. So this is really, really important, this bridge. It literally does a bridge between the strings and the sound box or the chamber of the instrument. So this is all with an acoustic lyre. Acoustic or hollow body, it's the same thing. A solid body lyre will be slightly different because it won't have an actual box. It will have, I don't have an example with me anymore, but it instead carves out a space in the instrument itself. And it's within this concave space that the resonance is created and projected forward. It has a little bit of a different sound to it. It's a little bit quieter, has a more delicate sound in certain ways. So because it doesn't have this other piece of wood on top creating a box, again, it's just a concave carve out, it doesn't need two things. It does not need sound holes. It's sort of like one big sound hole, for lack of better words. That's not a very technically correct thing to say, but that's okay. And it also doesn't have a bridge. Rather, it goes straight into the body and is communicated, the sound waves, sound vibrations are communicated into the body that way. If you want to know a bit more, again, you can watch the other video I have. If you want to know even more on the technical side, I would recommend reaching out to a luthier, somebody who works and makes the lyre themselves. They would certainly know much more than I do and be able to speak to that with greater accuracy than I would be able to if I tried to answer more advanced questions. So diatonic lyres can be either acoustic or solid body, so acoustic or hollow, same thing, or solid body. Those are the basic pieces of the lyre. Again, we have the body, we have the crossbar, we have 2 arms, tuning pegs, strings that go over a bridge, we have the chamber or the sound box, and we have 1 or 2 sound holes. That's the basic structure of the lyre. Now we're going to take a moment and come back and compare this structure to a harp and a guitar, because it's sort of a mix between those two. So we'll come back and do that in just a moment. Okay, we're now looking at page 9 in the Lyre Foundations book. And this was something I decided to do a little bit later after I'd sort of finished this chapter, because I think it's a really helpful comparison and sort of activity to do to understand the lyre, what it is and what it's not. In comparison to the harp and the guitar, the way that I would sort of summarize this is to say that the lyre is played in a style more similar to the harp because it doesn't have frets on it, which I'll explain in a second. But the structure is actually more similar to that of a guitar. So let's look at what they have in common and what they have that are different. So first we're going to do the lyre versus the harp. Now I don't have a harp with me, but we can see a picture of it on page 9 and a nice little kind of chart. So what do they both have in common? So the first is that they have 1 pitch assigned to each string. So what I mean by that is that, for example, this is a C sharp right now. This string only plays a C sharp. Same with this string. Only plays a C sharp. I cannot do something to the string to make it change pitch and still pluck the same string. It's kind of like a piano as well, where each key is assigned 1 particular pitch. So this is the same with a harp. Now we have levers and things like that, but that's a slightly different thing. It adjusts the pitch, but it's still the same idea, that 1 string plays 1 note. This is probably the main reason why the lyre is played in a similar style a lot of times as the harp, because of this arrangement. Second thing it has in common is actually what I just said. You often play in a plucking manner, so rather than strumming, though you can do that. Usually that's with a Saxon lyre, but something like a diatonic lyre, you'd usually play in a plucking manner. Okay, that's what I mean by plucking, rather than a strumming with a plectrum or a pick. Okay. The third thing that they have in common also has to do with how it's played. It's simply that you can use 2 hands to create harmony and melody at the same time. You can sort of do this with guitar, but you do it in the same style, in the same way with a lyre compared with a harp. And that's what I just sort of illustrated here. We have the left hand playing something with the right hand playing something on top. And that creates a certain kind of music that is different than a guitar, but is the same as the harp. Okay, so what is different? There's actually a lot of differences between the modern lyre and the harp. So the lyre typically has steel strings. That's what this has. These are actually guitar strings. Same type of string as a guitar. Okay, whereas a harp usually has nylon strings. Now, again, this is there are different types of lyres and also different types of harps. So there are lyres that are made with nylon strings or with different materials, and that's usually for more ancient styles of lyres or Saxon lyres, not usually for the diatonic. So I'm just kind of speaking in generalities here. Generally, the modern lyre uses steel strings. The harp usually does not. Okay. The second thing is that the strings go over a bridge. Again, this is with an acoustic one, but it is very common for lyres for it to go over this bridge. That is not the case for a harp. If you look at the harp, even just on the most basic level, you can see there's no bridge on there. They go straight into the sound box. The strings, that is, they go straight into the sound box. That is not the case for most lyres. The third is simply that it usually has a bridge, whereas the harp does not. The fourth is one of maybe the most easily missed for somebody who's just starting out, is the way in which the strings relate to the sound box. So with a modern lyre, the plane of the strings, meaning this, it's like geometry, right? The plane of the string is parallel, so it's, oh, there we go, this way, okay? Rather than perpendicular, it's parallel to the sound box. So we can see the plane of the sound box compared to the plane of the strings. They run parallel and are connected by a bridge. Okay, even if you don't have a bridge, if you have a solid body, it's still, the plane also still runs parallel to it. This is not the case with a harp. Rather, the plane of the strings is perpendicular to the sound box. So you have the sound box, like this, and then the strings running like this. See if that's clear. Well, there we go. Close enough, okay? So, parallel versus it being perpendicular like this. And that makes a big difference on how you actually pluck the strings and how the strings are going to want to move. I'll talk about that more later when we get into how to pluck the strings. But just know that that's a big difference, and so it's going to create a different kind of resistance. It's going to feel different to play it, and simply that it's structured differently. Okay, the last thing that's different about the lyre versus the harp, again, I'm sticking with diatonic lyres in particular, is that usually, they can be made in diatonic, chromatic, pentatonic, all sorts of different ways, and they don't utilize levers. Levers are something that you can put on the tuning peg, and when you lift it up, it will raise or lower. I think it's usually raise. That would make sense to me. Raise the pitch, and sort of adjust the string. This has relation to do with the fact that these are steel strings rather than nylon strings, so they have a more limited stretch to them. On the harp, in contrast, it's usually a diatonic instrument, but it utilizes levers. So it's not usually a chromatic instrument like the piano, where you have every note, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, etc. It is not usually like that. Rather, it uses levers, and that opens up a space, levers or pedals, opens up space for you to utilize all of the notes, all of the pitches, but it does so in a different way than the lyre does. Okay, let's pivot now to comparing the lyre to the guitar. We've already kind of done this in our harp comparison, but let's make it very clear. So what do they have in common? Quite a lot. Usually they use the same kind of strings, steel strings. I already said this uses guitar strings. Or maybe we should say that guitar strings uses lyre strings. I don't know. Anyways, the same kind of string. The second is that they both have a bridge. So the strings go over a bridge into the sound box. Okay, again, bridge into the sound box. True for both. The plane of the strings is parallel to the sound box. So we talked a second ago about parallel versus perpendicular with the harp. Excuse me. This is the same. They're both parallel for the lyre and for the guitar. So they're going to actually feel a lot more similar than a lyre versus harp, which is quite interesting. And then also that you can use a strumming method to play. That's not something we're going to do in this course, but it is something that you could do. Okay, now how are they different? The main difference is that there's no frets on a modern lyre. Excuse me. Rather, again, there's one pitch per string. In contrast, if you're not familiar with a guitar, I think most people probably know this. If not, watch a few videos of guitars and you'll see exactly what I'm saying. You have the neck of the guitar, right? You have the longer part of it, and there's different frets on it. So basically, you shorten or lengthen the string by pressing down upon it. So you can change the length of the string by utilizing these frets. That's not something you can do with the lyre. So that's why the way of playing it is more similar to the harp rather than the guitar, even though the structure is actually quite similar to the guitar. Things like sliding, bending the notes, vibrato, that's not possible on the lyre, whereas it is on the guitar because, again, of the frets and the neck of the instrument. This is similar, the lyre is similar to harp and piano, where once you hit the string or hit the key, that's it. That's all you can do with it. You can't adjust anything after that. Whereas with the guitar, or with wind instruments, or with singing, you can do a lot of shaping of the note itself as you're still playing it. And then the last thing is already what I've said before, is the fact that there's not a neck on the lyre and there is on the guitar. So in a certain way, you could say that the lyre is, and it is actually the predecessor of the guitar, and what was added to the guitar was, rather than having to mute the strings, which is normally what you do to strum, you'd mute certain strings, they added a neck so that you can not only mute certain strings, but you could change the length of the strings and therefore have more notes available to you in a smaller space. So again, just to summarize, the structure is more similar between a lyre and a guitar, but because each pitch is assigned to one string, the style of music and the style of playing is more similar to the harp. Okay, with that, we will close this section, and I'll have just a concluding comment. Okay, that's all we're going to have for lesson 1. I hope that helps you to understand what instrument it is that you're playing. Feel free to explore your instrument, watch videos of people playing the harp, the lyre, and the guitar, and notice the difference in sound, in style, and also the similarities. And I think it'll help bring out even greater appreciation for the instrument. And play around on your lyre and experiment with the different parts of it. Take note of it. Get to know your lyre a little bit more than maybe you've been able to do before. Again, I hope this is helpful for you. We'll come back quite soon with lesson 2. We're still in chapter 1. And in that lesson, we'll talk about how to hold the instrument. I've got a number of pictures and stuff in the book. So take a look at that before you watch the next video if you so desire. And again, I hope it's helpful to you. Best of luck on your lyre playing. God bless you, and may the peace of Christ be with you. Thank you so much.